easyb allows you to express tests or expectations in a human-readable format. Those expectations can verify anything on the Java platform. You implement those expectations in a language called Groovy. Out of the box, easyb supports specifications and stories. Both have a different syntax, which I'll show you next. Specifications have a very simple format. You describe your expectations with the keyword it. So for example, I'd like to create a specification that describes my intended behavior of a stack. Thus, I can start my specifications with a description, and then I can delineate my expectations, again using the keyword it followed by a string. The string is simply human-readable text that again describes what you want done. Think of this in JUnit as the test's name. In this case, my first expectation describes the intent of an isEmpty method. My second expectation is the non-sunny day scenario, that is, if the stack has something in it, then it should return false. Something unique to easyb is the notion of appending behavior. That is, even though I haven't coded anything yet, I can still run this expectation or specification, in which case easyb will indicate that there are two pending behaviors in this specification. A pending status is useful in indicating that perhaps a particular feature hasn't yet been implemented. And just like with normal test-driven development, refactoring is a key part. In this case, I want to refactor the description of what it is I'm trying to code. You implement behavior inside a closure that follows your description. In this case, I've created a new stack, and then I'm now verifying the isEmpty method returns true. Note that instead of using assert, I use should be. After executing this specification, now easyb is indicating two have been run, however one is still pending. Accordingly, I'll implement my second expectation. In this case, I'm going to actually put something in the stack and then assert that isEmpty returns false. Now that I've executed this specification, I see that both of my expectations have passed. XUnit frameworks support the notion of fixtures, and so does easyb. In this case, I'm creating a stack twice, so I can put this in a before clause, which is run just once for the entire specification. easyb's verification syntax is quite simple. Obviously you've seen should be in action, but there's also the opposite, that is should not be. In addition to should not be and should be, there's also should not equal and should equal. To create a story in easyb, you create a file, call it whatever you want, and end it in the .story. I'm going to create a story that verifies the intent of a stack. In this case, I'm going to create two scenarios. The first scenario will verify that pop returns the last item pushed, and then I'd also like to verify that I can't actually push a null value. Stories, just like specifications, can be executed without any behavior in them. In this case, they'll also be marked as pending. Stories support a rich syntax. Each scenario in a story can have a series of steps defined with the keywords given, when, and then. Even though I've now defined these steps without any actual code behind them, I can still execute a story, in which case easyb will still report it as pending. Expressing your intent with human-readable text is quite powerful. In this case, I see that perhaps my intent isn't well documented, so let me change that. Now that I'm comfortable with the way I've described my intent, I can begin to add code to my story. In this case, code is written in Groovy, and as you'll see, Groovy is just a subset of the Java syntax. Note, I don't need to define types. Parentheses for method calls are optional. So as you can see, I'm going to push 2 items and then verify that when I call pop, B is returned. I can now execute this story, in which case I'll still have 1 pending scenario. Also note that, as I mentioned earlier, should be can also be replaced with should equal. The behavior's exactly the same. It's entirely up to you which you choose to use. In coding the second scenario, I'll actually have to use a different type of syntax for my assert. In this case, I'll end up using easyb's ensure throws method. The ensure throws method in easyb essentially allows you to execute a closure and then verify that whatever happened in that closure throws a particular exception. In this case, I'll create a closure which forces a null value to be pushed on the stack. Then I'll pass it to the ensure throws clause and ensure that when I do so, a runtime exception is thrown. easyb stories also support fixtures. In this case, you can run a fixture once for an entire story or for each scenario. In this case, I'd like to create an empty stack for each scenario. Therefore, I'll use the before each clause. This clause also takes a series of steps, so I'll just repeat the given, in which case then I'll be able to remove it from the subsequent 2 scenarios. You can run easyb via the command line, Ant, Maven, there's an Eclipse plugin, and as you saw in this video, an IntelliJ IDEA plugin. For more information about easyb, go to easyb.org. From there, you can find the latest version, documentation, and examples. You can also join the users list and check us out on Twitter.